and 2 this time around, because you mentioned that you really wanted to do that practice piece, and I saw it again in the chat box. So we're really going to dig in and give you a chance to really do that practice and look at how you can apply race equity lens in your work and advocate for students. So we're going to really focus on that today. Past 2 sessions, we framed our work around Glenn Sinkinson's 4 agreements. It's a way for us to really navigate around race conversations. This is something that you can also utilize with your students. Understanding that this is a process that requires engagement of all, and there will be discomfort. Conversations about race is just that. It will be discomfort. But as you engage in more dialogue, it will become a little easier to continue and persevere. Speak your truth. Only with truth can we actually make progress. And you have to realize this is a back and forth movement, because you will learn and sometimes have to go backwards because you are taking time to educate, you're taking your time to find ways to advocate, and you're finding ways to engage people in this dialogue. And last but not least, we want you to do what? Agree to disagree if necessary. So let's take a look at this in a little glimpse. Again, not checking out, using the compass. If you're not familiar with what we mean by compass, a slide is going to appear, but we reference this in part 1, so you can go ahead and download that video as we talked about for part 1 in terms of looking at which lens someone enters the conversation in, whether they enter from a moral, intellectual, emotional lens or social lens. So we talked about that, and it's important to know how people are entering the conversation so you can engage with them properly. And the other things I mentioned already, connect with your feelings and speak your truth. As we mentioned, Glenn talked about this very concretely, understanding how people come into the conversation. So in part 2, we gave you some data in terms of how race impacts us in terms of the different institutions where we've seen systemic racism occur. So by offering that data and you personally, how you internalize it, you may be the person that enter it by needing to have the data to support you in wrapping your head around it. You may be just the person that believes this is a moral thing. We have to just make some change, and it is just that we need to have a right or wrong in this process. You may be someone who enters this emotional because it may be something that someone says that strikes a core because you experienced it personally or someone in your family. So it brings that feeling of anger, anxiety, just whatever feeling that comes into play. And so you may approach that conversation in an emotional lens. And last but not least is the social lens, which is the lens we're going to concentrate more, because we're going to give you some tools to figure out how to enter that conversation a little bit more. So you may enter the social lens by saying, I just need to take action. I may be involved in different community groups. I may be involved in the Black Lives Matter Week for Action, where I get my students involved, but that's how you enter the conversation about race. To get us started, we're going to do a mini activity. And for this, I'm going to ask you to we're going to try with the microphone unmuted and see how that goes. I may end up changing my mind with the number of folks. So let's play around and see how this works. This is one of those teachable moments. We'll see how it works with a large group. So there's going to be a couple pictures that come up, and basically in unison, as much as you can, you're going to read the color you see out loud as I put them on the screen.
Red.
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 Yellow.
Yellow.
Red.
Blue.
Yellow. Blue.
Green.
Green.
Black.
Black.
Green.
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 Gray.
Gray.
Black.
Blue.
Blue.
Yellow.
Hello? Keep up with me. I know you're probably saying, what is she doing? Keep going with it.
Orange.
Blue.
Gray.
Gray.
Purple.
Purple.
You guys are doing great. Keep going.
Red.
Blue.
Blue.
This is blue.
Blue.
Yellow.
Blue.
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 Green.
Light.
Blue.
Oh,
Black.
that was neat.
Oh.
That was
Pink.
Blue. Pink.
yeah,
Blue.
just like blue.
Pink.
Pink and blue.
Okay, for the next 2 lines, I'm gonna have you go ahead and mute yourself and say out loud and keep the pattern up, okay?
Blue. Blue.
If you can mute yourself,
Oh, sorry.
no problem. Keep going. Keep saying it to yourself. Take yourself off mute and try again.
Green.
Green.
And blue.
Orange.
Blue.
Brown.
Blue.
And blue.
Blue.
And blue.
Green.
Maybe purple.
And blue.
Green.
Blue and blue.
Dark gray.
Blue.
Black.
Blue.
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 Yellow.
Blue.
Pink and blue.
Blue.
Pink and blue.
Okay.
That was
You guys
good.
sounded
I like
more
that.
muted the first time. Anybody
I
notice
like.
what's occurring? What,
I noticed that the words are not the same as the color that they are. So I was wondering if we were supposed to be reading the words or saying the color that was the word was.
The directions said to name the color you
Color you
see,
see.
and the colors that you see were not always the same as the words that you saw, but you're supposed to
Right.
identify the colors that you see.
That's what
Okay.
you're exposed to. Yeah.
That's what I
But is it the
thought, but
color
I
of the
wasn't sure.
background or is it the color of the word?
It makes sense.
You see, because
the
you can
background
see the
was
color.
stationary.
Yeah.
So what we were concentrating on the color you saw in the word. So
Okay.
maybe might make it white so there's no confusion. But anybody saw that there was a disconnect between what you saw versus what you read?
Yes.
Not for
Yes.
me
Everyone experienced that to some degree. Okay, so
at first, I think.
what do you think caused
Yeah,
that
to think
difference?
about.
Perception.
Okay, perception.
Yeah, perception is a big part of it.
What
Yeah.
else?
We had assumed that the words were going to match the color
Yeah,
of the word, and that is what threw you off a little bit.
I agree.
Yes.
So in
Ability to
some
process.
ways, I had primed you by giving you matching words, so you automatically were looking for the words,
Yes.
the color. So that's about priming. So that's a term that we talk about when we talk about racial conversations. What else?
I was
What
trying to memorize.
what you were reading and your mind was saying were two different things.
Kind
So
of like
there was like a conflict there.
it
So
was.
Very good point. Because sometimes there's that internal struggle when we deal with the conversation about race, that you may have been taught something, but it doesn't match the way you're actually experiencing. So this all comes into what we talk about, what caused you to slow or stop. It may be that once you figure out the pattern, then you started to really concentrate on look at that color versus the word. But this is what we talked about when we talked about unconscious versus conscious competence. So in session number 2, we talked about that kind of spectrum as when you move from understanding a topic, you start from the unconscious, you don't know what you don't know, and you want to move to the conscious competence so that it is becoming so real that you know how to not only navigate it for yourself, but can advocate it to others. So if you are not familiar with that conscious competence theory, I suggest that you go back and review our Anti-Racist Part 2. You'll see that mini clip and I'll give you an idea a little bit more of the theory behind that. So we gave you this activity because we wanted you to have something that you can utilize with your students. This is a great activity that you saw was simple, not as controversial, but you already saw that sometimes we are biased because we see color versus words, and that may be how we interact with information. But you can see that you can unpack a lot from this if you were to really do it. So what I'd like you to do right now is take a 1-minute reflection in your journal and think about how you may utilize this with your students. And if you want to add your comment to the chat box, I'm sure your colleagues would appreciate that. You can also do that reflection in the chat box as well. Oops, sorry, I went too fast. You're still reflecting. Again, you can use this activity to talk about cultural norms, what we expect to be the case. So you can use this in multiple ways, have students reflect and actually do it. So we hope as you engage in this, we want you to have both that, how to bring this back in your classroom and also be an advocate, that voice in our path to becoming an anti-racist educator. So some of the things that we also suggest that you can do is you can bring conversation into the classroom by making sure you have high expectations for students. We know we all hold that. We wouldn't have such a large crowd of people in the room if that wasn't one of your pieces. You want to believe that all students are able to succeed and you're going to give them that, the tools to do that. But one of the ways you can do that is offer them counter stories. So looking at your current curriculum and finding ways to make sure that they can see, students of color can see themselves and they can see themselves in a positive light as opposed to the victimized image that sometimes appears in curriculum. So offering them counter stories where they see themselves as heroes, where they see themselves in that positive piece. You want to provide histories and stories from diverse populations, not just as we talk about diversity, we've been talking about a lot from minorities, which we don't tend to use, people of color, but we want to realize that we're all diverse and we all bring different perspectives. And we also want to offer equitable classroom practices, random calling, equity sticks. A great tool, digital tool that you can use to do random calling online is a website called Flippity. I think it's .net. I don't think it's .com. I'll double check. But anyway, if you Google it and we have a chance, I may pop it up so you can see it in action. And what it will do is just randomly call students, but it has a great visual where you can random call by just a lottery, or you can random call so they know who's coming up, which is called lineup. So at least it prepares people to, oh, I'm going to be called on because I see my name is coming up. So there's different ways, and of course, equity sticks still will work online. You just show it and the students will see their name. Different questioning skills and tracking how often you call them different subgroups. This is something we always convince works. It works a lot easier with face-to-face, where you can have another colleague come in and observe to see who you're calling on. But now that we are in digital world, some of you guys are actually recording your classroom. So maybe you can do a post-analysis of yourself, how often you call on different subgroups, whether it's by gender or by racial composition, to see if you're really targeting students differently based on who they are. So a great tool for you to use to be more cognizant of that. So these are a few ideas to bring it back into your classroom. Why is my screen not moving? Sorry. Here we go. And to get us started in our next activity is we're going to lead it to Beth, who's going to talk to us about Teaching Tolerance Speak Up, which is a tool we're going to utilize to give you some ways to really talk about race and to have skill sets to do that. But before we get into that, I wanted to make sure I had some time to answer any questions and dig into the first part of what we did. Anybody have any additions that they want to share about tools that they can use to bring it back in the classroom? See, some people, oh, thanks Liz for putting it. It is flippity.net. Thanks for posting that. So great tool. I see some people saying books. Yes, diversity of books. We also talked about 2 different companies that really have been doing a lot of mixture of how to really provide that counter story that we're talking about. So if you are looking for resources, you can tap into Teaching Tolerance, which is one of the companies we're using to kind of elaborate on today. Another entity is called Embrace Race. They've been doing a lot of books. We also, MSCA has partnered with First Book, and so they have a lot of friendly books as well that supports the diverse population of students that you may have. So you can look into that as well. Any other ideas or questions?
Geraldine, I saw a comment that I think would be a good question from Lisa about how it's more difficult to talk about this at the high school level. Do you have any recommendations or tips on how to make this appropriate to the grade spans that you work with?
Yes, so obviously with the different grade levels, you may, you can move it up a notch. So this activity that we gave you would work from elementary to high school because it's color, it's not heavy in content. But one of the pieces you can do is have students look at, for example, a text and talk about what are some of the implicit and explicit biases that we see in a context of a curriculum. So that would be something that would take it to the high school level. So we sometimes are not cognizant of these things. And one of the things that you can do is talk about white privilege. And we did an activity in our first part 1 where students were able to, sorry, not students, but you as attendees were able to participate in this unpacking white privilege. And so it's a questionnaire that has you analyze how your race has impacted you and given you certain advantage. Like, do you make considerations of, if you're going to a store where you typically find the food that you eat in a local grocery store. So that may be impacted by your race because certain foods are not maybe mainstream in regular grocery stores, and you may have to go to your more cultural grocery stores. They may be, again, do you ever consider when you go into a store whether people are looking at you a certain way because of your certain race? So there's different questions within that. Another tool that also be good at the high school level, we also highlighted that in part 1 and part 2. MSCA did a toolkit with First Book, and Harvard did a bias study, and it's broken by different subgroups. It may be by gender, it may be by race, it may be by economics, and you can look at your level of bias, how biased you are based on these different subgroups. And that may be something that you have your students take and talk about if they learn something new about themselves, another way of thinking about it. So that's taking it a couple notches higher from the elementary to the high school level. Great question. Beth, if you see another question, I'll take it. Otherwise, I'll throw it back to you.
I think we're ready, but if folks do have more recommendations or strategies, please put them in the chat box. I always go through and we'll combine and sort them afterwards as a resource. So please keep adding stuff. I saw some other ideas around book clubs, adapting lessons to events that your students may be personally having feelings on or experiencing. So Those are some great ideas. So as we transition into Teaching Tolerance to Speak Up, if you're not familiar, it's a really great resource. There's a pretty long guide, which is linked in the handout that we sent out, but we have synthesized it down for tonight. So if you just have a lot of free time, which I hear educators do these days, you can totally read the whole thing, but hopefully you will walk away with a foundation. So the number one thing, and I'm sure like you all, if you just take a second and think about an opportunity that you had to address bias, whether that be in your family circle, with friends, in your school building, and then think about how you handled that. Would you give yourself an A? I nailed it. Maybe a C? I kind of like said something, but it doesn't quite land. Or maybe, you know, an F? I didn't quite address it at all, actually. I let it slide because it was easier to do that. And I think the truth is that we all have these moments where we can step up. And so Teaching Tolerance to Speak Up gives us just that, tools to speak up and interrupt bias when we see it in our everyday lives. And the number one thing that they stress, which I think is just so real, is that we have to be prepared, because like anything, you cannot just have an intention to do it and it will magically happen. So the key things we're going to focus on today is preparing some phrases or questions you can use to actually interrupt that bias or challenge it when you see it. And then we're going to practice those phrases out loud as best we can on Zoom in breakout rooms. So those are the two things we're going to focus on tonight. So for folks who are familiar, this will be review, but Teaching Tolerance Speak Up has 4 main strategies of how you can actually challenge bias when you see it. These are in the handout as well, but I just wanted to review them. So the first is to interrupt, right? This means that we are gonna challenge, call out bias every time we see it without exception. Phrases that could be used on this are things like, I don't like words like that. The second strategy is to question it, asking simple questions to highlight and begin to address the situation. So why do you say something like that? What did you mean by that? Good open-ended questions. Then we have educate. So explain why a term or phrase is offensive. We don't want to assume that somebody understands the context of a word, especially when we have words that can be very coded around race that people use all the time. So did you know the history of that word? And then the fourth thing is to echo. So the first 3, right, are something that you as an individual can do. But sometimes, right, we need somebody else to tag in and back us up, or we see somebody doing this work and we want to back them up and actually echo the support and set a norm that this is not something that belongs in this space or that we do think is wrong as a school community. So something like, thanks, Geraldine, for speaking up. I agree, that word is offensive. And sometimes just tagging one more person in or echoing can really help to set the standard of what's acceptable or not in a situation or community. So now we're going to do a chat box quiz just to help us familiarize ourselves with these. So a phrase is going to come up on the left-hand side. In the chat, put down which strategy you think this phrase falls into. I put them in the top right corner as a little cheat. So just in the chat, when you see it, put interrupt, question, educate, or echo. All right, Geraldine.
We're going to use a delayed chat just to make sure everyone has a chance to type. So once you see the phrase, I'm going to say type, but do not hit submit. So about 15 seconds later, I'm going to say hit submit so we can see all the responses pop up at the same time.
What's the question?
So you have to decide whether tell me more, which one of the strategies you would use, interrupt, question, or educate primarily, and just put your response in the chat box. And when I hit say submit, hit submit.
It's already happening, Geraldine. Everyone's going.
All right, submit. Okay, let's try the next one.
The next one. Okay, that phrase is hurtful.
And submit. And next phrase. Submit. And the last phrase. Submit. Okay, obviously, some of you guys may have had a different response than us because it all depends on the conversation and how you interpret it if the conversation was taking place. But the idea is you want to use these 4 tools to kind of enter the conversation. One is to interrupt, just enter it. Mainly question and educate is where that engagement back and forth would take place. And then the echo is if you want to help support another colleague or family member in terms of supporting statements that are anti-racist, to make sure you know people are cognizant of that. So to get us started a little bit more, we're going to have a little video. It's about a 2-minute video clip. It goes really quickly. So I'm going to play the video. Again, we're going to use a delayed chat box process. You're going to type your response in terms of deciding whether the strategy you're going to use is interrupt, question, or educate. And you're going to not only indicate what strategy and maybe also what phrase you may say based on the comment that was made. So again, we're going to use a delayed chat process for this. So after the video, you will type your response, but you will not hit submit until I've indicated, so we can make sure that everyone has had a chance to reflect and respond. I think I have to stop. I know. I will replay.
Doing this. Isn't this what the Mexicans are for? I didn't know what to say.
Put my volume, so.
I didn't know what to say.
I didn't know what to say.
I overheard another teacher
During a service
commenting to a
project.
We've got
student.
2 videos playing.
Park.
Yes.
I heard a group of students laughing and one of them planting trees.
Not good.
I didn't know what to say. During a service project planting trees at a local park, I heard a group of students laughing and one of them said, "Why are we doing this? Isn't this what the Mexicans are for?" I didn't know what to say.
Should I interrupt? I'll do both.
So just as a reminder, if you want to put in the chat box what strategy and a phrase you would use to accompany that strategy.
Okay, if you haven't already done so, I see some people posted a little early, go ahead and hit submit. I see some responses of what do you mean by that? That's a question. See, some people said educate. Somebody offered some education about NPR and code switching. Somebody said they would interrupt and say, why do you say that? To get some more clarity. How do you think that would make people feel? Again, that might be entering into Glenn Singleton's emotional lens, so bringing that compass into play. Again, just simply explaining that this is offensive so that there's a clear message that you believe that the language was offensive, but seeking clarity so that they can open up. Tell me why you said that. A lot of great responses. So you had a chance to do this as a whole group, and what we're going to do is take this and practice this a little bit further into breakout rooms. So you're going to have your facilitators. They're going to show another scenario. And you're going to actually go a little bit deeper, and they're going to explain how we're going to do a role play process, and they'll share that. But we want everyone to be active in this piece. So we're going to ask you to really think about which of the tools, and mainly we're going to concentrate on question and educate, because at this point we all would interrupt, because that's what we're agreeing that is the right thing to do, to interrupt and enter in this, because silence is not the answer. And so to break down racial comments, we need to be able to have a response. So you're going to concentrate on the question and educate part, and everyone is going to be supporting two of the role play folks. So Beth is going to push you guys out to breakout rooms. So at this time,